My name is Joey Adams, and I'm outside the African American History Museum, and today we'll be talking about African Americans in the Revolutionary War. Crispus Attucks was the first person to die at the Boston Massacre. And with that, this is where our story begins. On the evening of March 5th, 1770, a group of Bostonians and a group of British soldiers stationed in Boston got into an argument. What exactly happened to spark the gunfire is still debated, but gunfire did ring out. Shot in this was 5 people, the first of which was Crispus Attucks, a freeman, who had to use a fake name at the time, but still felt strong enough to stand up to the British occupying Boston. One thing to remember is that the Patriots didn't have a monopoly on black soldiers. Many black soldiers would work with the British for their cause because they saw more of a chance of freedom. The British was the first to officially welcome in African Americans to their ranks. This happened with Lord Donmore's proclamation. This proclamation promised freedom to any slaves who helped fight the British cause. The people who worked with the British were called Black Loyalists. One of the most famous of these Black Loyalists was named Boston King. Ironically, he was from South Carolina, but they still call him Boston. After the war, King was able to escape to Nova Scotia. However, while there, he felt and faced harsh racism, so he immigrated to what is now known as Sierra Leone. While there, he helped found the settlement and now largest town of Sierra Leone, Freetown, and he was the first Methodist missionary to work with indigenous African people. While official statements, the British may have had the Americans beat when it came to welcoming African American soldiers. In reality, African American soldiers were fighting for America ever since the Battle of Lexington and Concord. A person of note from this battle is named Leonard Haynes. He was of mixed race heritage. However, at that time, that meant he was basically African American. After the war, he became a writer, and he wrote extensively about how liberty for African Americans, for white Americans. Also, he was a clergyman and one of the first ordained African American preachers. The next battle I will be speaking about is the battle at Bunker Hill, and how African American named Peter Salem played a pivotal role in this battle. Salem was also a part of the Battle of Lexington and Concord. He is notable because he is credited for killing the British Major John Pitcairn in the battle at Bunker Hill. Salem spent 4 years in the army in various campaigns. However, his life didn't end too well because he died in a poorhouse. However, after that, people in the town that he came from, Framingham, erected a monument in his honor. Unlike this painting that we have that shows him cowering. Most people say that wasn't a good depiction of what happened that day. Salem Poor is another African American soldier who helped at the Battle of Bunker Hill. He was able to mortally wound the British Lieutenant Colonel James Abercrombie. Think about this, if you will. African Americans played vital roles in taking out at least 2 high-ranking officials for the British. I am here in Lafayette Square. Behind me is the general himself, and we'll talk about someone who used his name. There was a man who took on Lafayette's last name. His name was James Amistad, and he was an African American spy. And I say this with no over-exaggeration. Without this man, the Patriots would have had a much harder time winning the Battle of Yorktown. Amistad was able to successfully infiltrate General Cornwallis's camp. He posed as a runaway slave and was able to ingratiate himself within the British camp. Cornwallis couldn't pass up this opportunity, so he wanted to use Amistad as a spy. So this kind of made him a double agent. He would cross between lines, feeding the Patriots real information while feeding the British hogwash. This led to victories at Yorktown, Hampton, and took years off of the war effort. This is Lena Ferguson. She tried to become a daughter of the Revolution in 1984. However, she was rejected, all because she was African American. This plays into a wider issue of African American needs being overlooked, and it really hits home the point. This goes to the point of how many times people would try to hide the contributions of African Americans in America. African Americans have fought and they have died in every major American war. And sometimes they do not get the credit for what they've done and for what they've sacrificed. There is something called the National Liberty Monument. This monument is a tribute to the African Americans who fought and died in the American Revolution. However, with that said, it's not complete yet. This project has been in limbo since 1986. And honestly, I believe a monument is necessary because many people don't know that African Americans played any part in the revolution. While the monument in DC is not built yet, there are some others around the nation. For example, this one in northern Georgia. The placement of this is unique because it sits adjacent to a Confederate monument. African American soldier tended to stay in the army longer than his white counterpart. Many times there were a real shortage of sailors. So even in the South, African Americans could become sailors. Many times the South wouldn't really want to arm the African American population in normal combat, but they really needed their help when it came to naval warfare. As a matter of fact, South Carolina had a huge number of black sailors and pilots, relatively speaking. As we come to the conclusion of this video, it's a few takeaways I would like you to have. The first takeaway is that I could expand on these guys so much. People like Boston King and Salem Poor, I could make an hour-long video about them just by themselves. Also, one of the big reasons for this video is some people feel disillusioned. They feel that the American dream isn't for them. I want to do this video to say, yes, it is. Your forefathers fought, died, bled for your right to say, I can have the American dream. No matter how difficult things may seem, I can have that dream.